Okay, does this work? Is okay. We're almost ready to start. It's not quite 10:30, but I just want to see if this is great. Okay, and
Good morning. Welcome to members of the media that have gathered here today, as well as those that are watching via live stream. My name is Ryan Aylesworth. I'm Mansfield's town manager. I'm joined this morning by Mayor Antonia Moran and Deputy Mayor Ben Shaken. We're here to discuss recent actions taken by the University of Connecticut that have significant, wide-ranging implications for the future of the town of Mansfield and its citizens. In a moment, I'll turn over the microphone to Antonia Mayor Moran so that she can give an official statement, and we'll open things up for any questions that you all have. One brief housekeeping item. There are no microphones out in the audience, and so to ensure that people watching via live stream can hear, I will repeat any question that you have to ensure that everybody can follow along. Thank you again for coming this morning, and without any further ado, I want to turn things over to Mayor Moran.
thank you, Ryan, and thank you everybody who's here and anybody who is watching. UConn has been part of our community since 1881. The town has grown up around the university as the university has grown up in our town. For decades and decades, over 100 years, we have watched the university grow. It has become a major force in our state and in our community. During that time, particularly in recent years, we have worked very hard as a town to build a partnership with the university. And that partnership has had some very significant consequences. We have partnered to build a downtown. We have partnered to build a sewer system at Four Corners. In addition, we have met regularly with university staff, both in public meetings through our town gown committee and in private staff-to-staff meetings regarding all kinds of issues from student parties to real estate. So we were truly blindsided when we were informed that the university had purchased 19.3 acres of land at Four Corners, 14.8 of which are currently zoned as high-density mixed commercial and residential land. We don't have very much land of that sort in our town, partly because we treasure our sense of rural community. But this is one of the areas which we have set aside for development, partly because it borders on the university, and our partnerships with the university were designed to produce research and development, and development particularly up there. This purchase permanently removes this land from our tax rolls. We can't tax state land. We get some compensation through our pilot programs, but never at the full value that it would have been taxed at if it were privately owned and had remained within the municipality. As a result of that sale, a major developer, Capstone, has withdrawn its plans for a development that would have had 358 housing units. The sale of that land was recorded yesterday and is a completed deal. The impact of this sale is huge, and it affects some very large policy issues. For example, we have been working to create affordable housing in this town so that we would comply with state mandates. The state requires that you have 10% of your housing deed restricted as affordable housing. Through the developments of new apartment complexes both in downtown stores and in the southern end of the town, our affordable housing has fallen to less than 7%, and we have been working through planning and zoning regulations to create opportunities for low and moderate income housing. This development would have provided 30 units of housing for low and moderate income, and also would have provided funding for low and moderate income housing in another part of town. Not only that, but Mansfield needs housing stock. One of the things that's happened to our town over the last couple of decades is the demand for housing from UConn students has resulted in the transition of more than 500 single-family residents to rental units, most of which are occupied by students. That means that if you are a family with low or moderate income, housing has become more and more expensive in this town. And in fact, many of the people who are affiliated with the university go to other towns now rather than staying close to their workplace or their school. In addition, this has a very significant impact on our town's revenues. And it will ultimately produce higher taxes for our residents, not to mention higher taxes for residents of the state, because this is being funded by bond funding. This purchase undermines years, literally years, of collaborative work with the university, and we have worked particularly around productive economic development, and particularly at Four Corners. The fact that the university now holds this threat over our heads, that is, that the threat's in two parts. They have threatened to withhold access to the sewer system to certain developers, and they have also now raised the specter of, if we don't like what you're doing, we'll just buy you out. So we have lost the impact on our relationship is very severe. This purchase was done through a consent agenda on the Board of Trustees meeting a week and 10 days ago. From what we can see, there was no debate. We have not heard that members of the state administration were aware of the purchase. It is not clear to us that the Board of Trustees knew what they were doing. What we do know is that the arguments for making this purchase have been couched in environmental terms. But in private conversations, university officials have made it very clear to us that the real issue is student housing. We're angry about this. That's really an understatement. We are currently engaged in we're exploring all our options to fight this decision and any future action by the university. The university has already filed an appeal of an inland wetlands decision on another development, and I'm very concerned that this is portends future interference with town business. We have filed FOI requests. We have asked for communication around the use of bonding funds, spending on consultants, and their legal counsel on this and other proposals. So let me be a little bit more specific. There are two big issues for the town here. One of them is affordable housing, and the other is economic development. 1/3 of UConn students live off campus or commute from home or from some other place. Many of those students have rented houses or apartments in town and have driven up the cost of rental units dramatically over the past decade. Not only have they driven up rents, but they have made single-family homes, which would be ideal for graduate students, incoming staff, incoming faculty, or people who work for the town or in the town, much more expensive than they are in neighboring communities. This has priced out our low and moderate income families, families with children, and lots of others. The project that they bought out was referred to as the Villas. It's developed by a company called Capstone, and it was called the Villas, so that you'll hear these two terms interchangeably. This particular construction would have helped relieve the pressure on our neighborhoods. It would have provided housing for people who want to live off campus, but who are now living in communities. And I will tell you that over the decade that I have been on the town council, one of the major issues that we have had to deal with over and over again is disruptive student behavior in our residential neighborhoods. Most students are fine, but all you need is a couple of students to have drunken parties, and the neighborhood becomes very angry. People become afraid to leave their houses at night, and their housing values drop. So we would very much like to have students move somewhere closer to campus in some form of congregate housing and relieve the pressure on our neighborhoods. In addition, it's very clear that people who work and study at the university will do better if they are closer to their workplace. We need to have a university community, and that means communities of people living near the university. That would support UConn. It would also support their tech park, which is part of our economic development. More specifically, as a result of our new housing regulations, the villas would have provided 30 apartments for low and moderate income. And as a result of a density bonus, which is part of the regulations, they would have contributed $1.4 million to a low-income housing development, which is being built by the nonprofit Mansfield Nonprofit Housing Corporation on South Eagleville Road. This was the basic grant funding for this project, which would have created 42 units, of which 14 were for very low-income families and others were for moderate-income families. Without this funding from this development, that project is essentially dead on its feet, unless we find some other sources. So the purchase, the removal of this land from the potential for development for housing has had a real impact on Mansfield. The second impact is economic development. The federal government created a form of economic development called the Economic Development Zone, which gives all kinds of tax breaks to people who invest in building and developing land and businesses in that zone. We have an economic opportunity zone in the area around Four Corners, the northwestern part of town. Thank you. And most of that land much of it is owned by the university already. So there is developable land that UConn owns outside of what they just bought. Mansfield has only 94.3 acres of developable, too many B's in that word, developable land. And if you take out the wetlands, it's even less. It's a 16% loss of developable land in the economic opportunity zone. Now, Governor Malloy put this economic opportunity zone in Mansfield because his vision was to develop a corridor that ran New York, New Haven, Mansfield, Boston for economic development, for research and development, to create jobs for the state. It was a state agenda to use Mansfield as a driver for job creation in the state of Connecticut. Use the research and development parts of the university to build Connecticut's economy. With this land gone, and with the threat that if UConn doesn't like your project, they'll either take you to court for a decade or buy you out, we're really concerned about our ability to attract responsible developers who meet Mansfield's criteria for responsible development. In addition, Mansfield was counting on this development for a number of reasons. We are very dependent on state support for our town's budget. We need economic growth in tax revenue. This purchase alone probably cost Mansfield $2 million a year in revenue. $2 million a year in tax revenue. So not only have we lost the opportunity to develop further, but we were counting on this development to reduce taxes or stabilize taxes, to provide services for Mansfield's community, and to provide stability for the town. In addition, UConn assisted us in building a $9 million sewer line through the Four Corners for the purpose of economic development. The people who are along that sewer line are paying fairly high costs of assessment to help pay it back. The promise was we would develop that area and the cost for the sewers would be divided among a larger number of units of real estate or housing or whatever. If that doesn't happen, those residents will continue to pay those high rates. And finally, in conclusion, the investments that we made in this area, in economic development, in the sewers, in looking for housing, we're going to benefit UConn as well as Mansfield. We thought we had a partner in the university. We're not sure whether the university will assist in future development, whether it's in their interest or not. And finally, this is a home rule state. The idea of home rule is that towns get to determine their own futures. The state doesn't. And with this action, the state of Connecticut has really overstepped its bounds in controlling what our town can do in the future. We're going to figure out how this came to pass, and we'll take any action we can. And now I'll turn it back to the town manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As promised, we want to open it up to any questions that the media may have at this time. And I will remember to repeat the question so that those listening at home can hear it. Any questions?
Yeah, so I apologize if this sounds like a dumb question, but so UConn, so who is the point of contact for sale when you sold it to them? How did that process work?
So the question pertains to who the point of contact was when the property was sold to the university. So the records that we've seen, there were the owners of record of the parcels, of which there were two. The land records show, and I would defer to our Director of Planning and Development for the names of the property owners, but the land was actually transferred from the owners of record to Capstone, the developer, and then immediately sold by Capstone to the University of Connecticut. That was the chain of events, and basically Capstone, it was a pass-through land deal in that sense for a combined value of $4.2 million. It was approved by the trustees. I believe the actual amount of the purchase of the land was $2 million for one parcel, and I think $840,000 for the second parcel. So $2.84 million combined for the land piece. Correct. Capstone had a full-fledged, filings with the Planning and Zoning Commission, very, very advanced level designs and build-out plans for multifamily development. And I should remember to repeat this. So then the follow-up question was just clarifying where Capstone was in process, and I was confirming that they had developed very detailed plans. And follow-up question again was, did Capstone pivot and sell the property to UConn? We're not in a position, obviously, to speak to Capstone's, sort of decision-making process. Clearly, as I said, they were far along in the process of designing their development. And for them, I think it's safe to say it was a business decision. They weighed their options in terms of continuing to move forward and go through what was needed to go through in terms of legal challenges that the university was mounting. And clearly a decision was made, combined decision was made between the owners of record and Capstone that this is what they wanted to do, and the project ended there.
So these were private owners?
Correct. The question was who previously owned the property. Were they private owners? And yes, they were private landowners. The question is what's UConn's plans for the property. Obviously, we don't want to speak for UConn. We can only comment on what's been publicly reported, and I believe it's been publicly reported that in some period of years, I believe it was reported perhaps 5 to 7 years, they plan to use this property that they've acquired for additional research and development, basically expansion of their tech park, but I don't believe they've sort of delved into any details of what that might be. I can confirm that I'm unaware of any communication, any notice that was given to the town manager's office or the town council or any official notice that was given prior to the trustees acting on this on their consent agenda on June 30th. The question was, what advance notice did the town receive, if any, from the University of Connecticut prior to the trustees' action on this? And again, to my knowledge, no official notice was given. And as the mayor said, based on conversations we've had with certain members of the Board of Trustees, it's not really clear to us to what extent the Board of Trustees really understood that item on the consent agenda. It certainly appears that at least some, those that we spoke to, were unaware that a land acquisition was actually taking place. So I'm going to invite our Director of Planning and Development, Linda Painter, up to the podium. She can, speak to. Oh, sorry, the question was, at what point or how long ago did Capstone initially file their permitting request? Correct, their development plan with the town, and then what do we know about the timeline in which when did Capstone start negotiating with UConn, or when did UConn begin negotiating with Capstone about the potential sale of the property. So I'm going to turn the podium over to Linda to at least speak to the first part of your question.
Good morning. My name is Liz. Mr. Aylesworth mentioned, my name is Linda Painter. I'm the Director of Planning and Development. So we have actually been working with Capstone for several years, so dating back, and I can get you more specific dates, to 2018, when both the town and Capstone were working on proposed amendments to zoning regulations to facilitate development of multifamily housing at the Four Corners. So that was when they started the process. So they did go through that with zoning amendments. Those amendments that the commission proposed and Capstone later proposed a minor tweak to became effective in 2019. And I believe it was later in 2019, again, I'll have to check the dates, that they had filed for their wetlands license for the project. So essentially, there was a long history here. And their wetlands license was approved in July of 2020, and within 15 days of that approval, the University of Connecticut appealed that approval in Superior Court. So in 2020, so July of 2020, the university appealed the approval of the inland wetlands license for the project. While that appeal was pending, Capstone continued to move forward, and they filed a special permit application with the town in 2021, or February of this year. And so we were in the public hearing process and had opened the public hearing. The university was participating in that hearing process. They were working through technical comments, and the hearing was scheduled to resume actually this evening. So until all of this happened, and we did receive an official withdrawal last Tuesday on July 13th from Capstone.
So I'll try to get too nuanced here, but you're correct. So UConn doesn't pay taxes directly. There's a program of payment in lieu of taxes so the state legislature, there's actually a new formula that's been in place. So we receive payment in what amounts to a portion or a fraction of the actual full market value or the assessed value of the property. In this case, under the new formula, we are authorized to receive. It obviously depends on what the legislature actually appropriates in a given biennial budget, but the law allows us to receive up to 50% of the assessed value of the property. So basically 50% of what would otherwise be the case if it was privately owned and there wasn't a tax exemption for a private landowner. I believe I believe, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe the value of the UConn campus is something like $1.6 billion in assessed value. Our total grand list is about $1.1, $1.2 billion for everything else.
So what is the estimate on the payment in lieu of taxes that you would receive on the land specific to this?
So we don't have any, so the question is, what's the value of the payment in lieu of taxes on the land? Of course, we can't really speculate because we have no idea what UConn would put out there. Right, so the value of the land itself, the question is, do we know the value of the land currently? And we do. The value of the land itself, in the grand scheme of things, though, is a small portion of what the value would have been had it been developed as planned. I'll have to get back to you on the current value, assessed value of the land itself in its current state. We have the developer was estimating that the build-out value of the property was approximately $60 million, and so at our current mill rate of $31.38 per thousand, that's where you get to a number of north of $2 million in taxes that would have been paid if we operate under the assumption that the assessor's value of the property is roughly commensurate to what the developer estimated it at, that $60 million figure. The sales, yeah.
It sounds like the payment in lieu of taxes might be more than $2 million a year.
Not for the question is, would the payment in lieu of taxes be more than our estimated more than $2 million if the land was developed as had been proposed by the private developer Capstone? Again, we don't know exactly what UConn will put on that property, but we can say with great confidence that the value that we will receive in pilot for whatever UConn puts there will probably be a small fraction of what Capstone would have generated in taxes.
Why is that?
So let me just, my name's Ben Shakin. I'm the deputy mayor. I just want to address the question of pilot generally. I think Ryan's talked about what we think we would have received in tax revenue had this development been built, which is around $2 million, maybe more. The pilot value on this land is negligible. It's land right now. The land itself without a building on it doesn't have much value. As Ryan said earlier, UConn said in the Board of Trustees agenda that they had some loose and non-detailed plans to sometime in the future, maybe 5 to 7 years, put some research and development property on the land that they purchased. I think we have a healthy bit of skepticism about those plans, given the recent past development of the tech park and how it has stalled from the original plans that the university put out. Pilot is funded by a formula, but only in theory, and so the town of Mansfield has set out a pretty significant goal to develop other tax revenue besides pilot, because we are at the whim of the state legislature in the state budget when it comes to whether pilot or not pilot is fully funded. So I think we could get back to you with a technical answer to how much would the formula of pilot pay for the land at the value that it's been assessed, and we will. But to some extent, it's besides the point. The point here is that we have been trying to get development into town so that we can count on tax revenue rather than having to rely on the state budget to fully fund or partially fund or fund better or worse in one year or another our payments in lieu of taxes for the property that the university owns in Mansfield, and the action by the university to take this parcel off of our tax rolls and put it into the pilot system and to take it away from being developable, which is something that we are trying to do at Four Corners, has made a significant dent into our ability to stabilize our tax base with non-residential property development or non-single family residential.
Assessed value is often based on market value. Capstone estimated the value of the property would be $60 million. It was sold for $2.6 million. So if you figure that if it were privately owned, we tax it at 3.1 mils on 70% of the property. The state pilot is on 50% of the value, and by taking this out of the development zone, the value of the property has been very substantially reduced. So, negligible pilot consequences.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, I want to, again, thank everybody for coming this morning. This is clearly an ongoing situation. We are going to, as the mayor said, continue to forcefully pursue any and all options to ensure that this or similar situations don't repeat themselves in the future. But to the extent that you have questions that arise that weren't answered today, please do reach out to my office. Please work through Margaret Chady, our communications specialist. Will be happy to set up a follow-up interview to answer any questions that you have. And as there are additional events or developments or information to share, we'll certainly be putting that out to the media and the members of the public as soon as that information is available. So thank you again for coming today.